Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram and plenty of other places at Hawk Blogger. And man, one of the most popular things we've done over the past few months is break down the walls, break down the barriers between different Seahawks podcasts and some of your favorites to bring them together under one roof, have one conversation. And we get so many requests like, can we get more of the roundtable with Griff and Rob Staton? And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do it whenever, but these guys have lives and they have their own pods and their own stuff and they're pumping out content. So very happy that we could make it happen today. Rob Staton at Rob Staton, Griff and Sturgeon at C Mike 2S's spin move, C Mike's spin move on Twitter. It's great to have you both on. It was a little bit of a close call with Griff. He's been recovering his voice. So the stars aligned and we were able to get that work in. How you doing, Griff? How you feeling?
Doing all right. I think it's allergies. I don't think I'm ill per se, but yeah,
well,
part of getting older.
As a longtime allergy sufferer, I feel for you. So I'm glad you're feeling better today. And Rob, you're featuring multiple Seattle sports today, and you're fit. How are you doing?
Very good, Brian. You wanted me to bring something up, so do you want me to bring it up now?
I do. Well, I was going to say, you were mentioning something to me about wanting to find ways to talk about the 49ers. And I'm like, okay, I'm scratching my head. Seems like you had a pretty good one to start off the show.
So for those of you who are not aware and do not follow English football, as we call it, and soccer, as you guys refer to it as, if you don't follow it at all, the San Francisco 49ers ownership group bought a team called Leeds United, and Leeds United played in the most important game in English soccer today, which is if you win, you get promoted to the Premier League. It's worth 80 million pounds, which is about 200 and something $million just to play in the Premier League. And they lost. So the Niners had their president is Parag Marath. He was at Wembley Stadium today watching it. Jed York, I think, is involved in some way. Will Ferrell has just been recruited to invest in Leeds United. So the Niners had a heavy presence at Wembley today. I can only imagine that had an impact on Leeds United stinking the joint out, playing a terrible game, losing to Southampton. So I've just been thinking of that meme, which is the two biceps clasping hands together today, with one bicep having the 49ers logo on it, the other bicep having the Leeds United logo on it. Another Niners gut-wrenching, horrible defeat today. So we can all drink to that, I'm sure.
Well, if something's on the line, I love it. I mean, it was Kyle Shanahan coaching. Was he on the sideline by any chance?
It might as well have been, given the way that they played.
I tried to turn into Griff and Maddie's Overload podcast, the recent one, to hear what you guys are talking about. But about 10 minutes into it, I think they were still talking about pancakes and waffles. And I got up to Griff eating pancakes with peanut butter. And one of the things that was confusing to me, Griff, was that you were equating the fact that the peanut butter has the word butter in it as if it was an alternative to butter. Is that how you see peanut butter, as an alternative to butter?
Only as an alternative to what exists between the syrup and the item being consumed.
You realize that the peanut butter is not part of the family of butters. Like, it's not.
It's a whole different. Yeah, there's dairy and then but is that an Evan level take? Because I don't have context for this. Is that an Evan level food take?
I don't think it's Evan level, but I appreciated the level of courtesy we're trying to show Maddie about making sure that pancakes or waffles were edible over there in England. Rob would know something about that as well, but
I didn't want to make any assumptions about it. I didn't just want to be too familiar. Like, how you eat pancakes or waffles, it may not be as common over there.
I got that. It came through very clearly. And I have to tell you guys before we get into the Seahawks stuff, because I had a bit of a moment this morning, a bit of a start. Are you guys? Do either of you do any sports betting?
Yeah, I do not.
Okay. Yes for Rob, no for Griff. I do like none. And I mean, I did many years ago. I think I've told the story to a bunch of folks, but I bet $500 many years ago on the Seahawks winning in Arizona against the Cardinals. This was the Matt Hasselbeck, Sean Alexander days. They were only favored by like 1.5. And this was the game for people that remember it. The Seahawks were up, they were running out the clock, and Matt Hasselbeck and Sean Alexander muffed the handoff as they were trying to run down the clock. And Arizona recovered under a minute, goes down, kicks a field goal, ties it, goes to overtime, and wins. And I'm like, screw this. Like, I don't need more reasons to be upset after my team loses. But today I did something I've never done before, which is I bet on a Mariners game because I had a feeling. I was inspired by your hat here, Rob. For folks that are listening and not watching, Rob's wearing a Mariners hat as well as a Seahawks sweatshirt. And I was like, Julio Rodriguez has had a crap year, but he hit a home run yesterday. He's been making a lot of hard contact. They had an absolute trash pitcher on the mound for the Washington Nationals today. I'm like, they've lost 2 in a row. He is going to step up today. He's going to hit a home run. I was sure of it. The Mariners are going to win. I was sure of it. And then I'm like, well, if he's going to hit a home run, I'm going to go on the overs on runs. So it was 0.5 for runs. So I'll take the home run and the over on runs. So I'm in a 3-leg parlay. And then I'm like, I really think he's going to get 2+ hits. But in this particular sports book, they didn't have hits. So I was like, well, I think he'll get another extra base hit. So I picked double. That he's going to get a double. And I said he's going to get a stolen base. $60 would have won me $1,500. And there goes Julio, home run in his second at bat. So home run and run hits.
Yep.
They end up, they're winning. It's looking pretty clear like they're going to win. He steals a base. So 4 of the 5 are there. He in the top of the 9th, he gets up with the bases loaded and he just lines it into the gap. And I'm like, it's going to happen. And Julio is clapping and just kind of trotting to first base because they got 2 RBIs. He didn't need to stretch it into a double. And I'm like, no, that was it. It was going to happen. And then what happens most of the time happened, which is I lost. So this is why I don't spend money on sports betting. It's not very appealing to me, but that was a fun go. And at least the Mariners won and Julio had a big day. So that was something.
Almost had it.
Do you have, Griff, you don't bet. Have you ever bet?
No, actually.
Okay. Rob, do you have any painful betting, like the most painful betting story?
No, I have a very nice betting story.
Okay.
And that was I think it was a couple of seasons ago. See, the great thing over here is the bookies, we call them bookies. I don't know what you guys call them over there. Bookmakers do not follow the NFL as closely as they do soccer and horse racing and cricket and stuff like that over here. So as long as you are willing to be patient, you've got 18 goes at this. There's 18 NFL weekends. As long as you wait, eventually there'll be just something there that smacks you in the face and you're going to go, I'm going to go all in on that. And it's like printing money. And there was this one week where it was an 8-player, you call it a parlay, we call it an accumulator. And I just looked at the 8 players listed and it was pretty much like every team's top receiver or running back to score a touchdown. And I was like, it was like 500 to 1 or something like that. And I was like, this is worth like just throwing some money at this and we'll see what happens. Anyway, 7 of the 8 players scored a touchdown before halftime. So I'm thinking, I just need Josh Jacobs to get a touchdown against the Broncos. And the game's drifting on and it's drifting on. And the Raiders are like 20 points up. And I'm thinking, they're not going to get a rushing touchdown now. I've given up. And then just as I'd given up, red zone flicker. And this just happened at Mile High. And Josh Jacobs like breaks from halfway. And there was enough time left on the clock for him to actually score the touchdown rather than fall down at the 1. He runs in. I'm shouting. I'm just like, hey, is that the Seahawks won the Super Bowl? Like, I woke my wife up. We won a load of money. Yay. Like, amazing. So that's sort of the high of, I don't think I've ever had anything that has made me sort of really curse. What I tend to do is if there's ever a big game on, I the sort of the disappointment compensation cover of like, there's a, your team's either going to win or lose. So if they lose, you might as well win some money. I've done that a few times.
Yeah, I think that's common for people. I feel dirty doing that. I can't do it. But anyway, I had to share the exhilaration and pain because look, we're in the off season. We're in the dog days of the off season for the Seahawks. A lot of folks are in the process of manufacturing things to talk about. I don't like to do that. Let's talk about real stuff. And one of the things I wanted to at least get both of your takes on. We've just finished OTAs, right? And this is the first time that the rookies and the vets were together. We got a little bit of Mike McDonald. We got a little bit of Rayshawn Jenkins press conference and Geno Smith. A little bit of film, a little bit of reports of people that have been there, some player interviews as well. Let's start with you, Griff. Anything that caught your attention in the kind of OTA week that just completed?
Everything from McDonald and Geno was fairly standard. I think Geno emphasizing that it's going to be a drop back offense. Grubb airs it out, right? It's a high volume pass offense. There's a lot that's put on the quarterback's shoulders, stuff that you probably could have guessed he would say. One thing that did stand out, Rayshawn Jenkins, when he discussed the dime package and how there will be some 3 safety stuff. That was interesting because I do think one question that is unanswered right now is some hard and fast thing that we don't know yet is who will be the big nickel that intermixes with Devin Witherspoon at the nickel spot. Because they can't have Witherspoon playing all 800 or so of the nickel snaps. They're going to need some other guy on early downs to get in there. And Rayshawn didn't say he was, but he said that was something that was being figured out with 3 safeties and such. So, he's a candidate. Julian Love would be a candidate. Really, all of them are because there's some interchangeability among all of them. You might also say redundancy though too. So they kind of have to figure out who fits where. But that was definitely something that caught my interest for sure.
I was curious, and Rob, I'm going to come to you in a second with the same question. Griff, do you follow Cody Alexander?
Yeah.
Did you see his Havoc rankings? I did a show with him on Monday, and he went over his perspective on the safeties for the Seahawks. Did you see his Havoc rankings for Rayshawn Jenkins and Kayvon Wallace, Julian Love, those guys? Did you see that?
Yeah, I have seen those. Yeah.
I was a little curious because for folks that might not have seen this, he had Rayshawn Jenkins as the 19th rated safety in the NFL. He had him as 11th against zone, in zone coverage, 68th in man. He had Kayvon Wallace as the 22nd rated safety, which this is out of 148. Yeah. He had him as 16th in man coverage and 26th in zone. And then Julian Love, he had lower, but still 27. He had 54th against man coverage, 33rd in zone. Curious if there's any of those that were different than the way you see those guys or aligned with how you see them. I just was kind of curious on that one.
No major objections. I think it probably passes the sniff test. I think that's a really cool composite stat that he's put together. There's going to be with any stat, there's going to be potential issues, right? They can't account for everything. Can't account for all the context, kind of the stuff that anyone would say. I think when you do well in a certain coverage, part of that is how are you being used in a way that would place more stress on you, less stress on you, then that can spit out different statistical results. That doesn't necessarily reflect the degree of difficulty or value of the assignment. But that's still those. Kayvon Wallace had a part-time role last year. I think he's an interesting player. I'm not going to plant my flag on anything there, but definitely a guy that, if he's coming off the bench and a coach like McDonald can definitely find a role for, right, and apply his skill set. So yeah, that's nothing glaringly stands out in either direction for me there. I think that's definitely a cool thing he's put together.
Yeah, Rob, we'll come back on the safeties a little bit, but I'm curious for you, anything from OTAs that kind of caught your attention?
Well, I suppose the first thing that really I found quite interesting is I've just been under the impression that, well, the Seahawks have signed a couple of linebackers, and they drafted one, so really, to an extent, they have addressed that position. But then when I think it was Jerome Baker who was not involved because of injury, and it suddenly made you think, no, actually, they're still pretty light there. Like it just felt uncomfortable to me that they're probably one player who is, I don't know, a reasonable veteran backup short of feeling comfortable with that position. And maybe the defensive front's just going to be so good that it doesn't matter. I don't know. But I did feel a little bit, because of that injury to Baker, a little bit cautious of, what could this look like in a few months if they, do have some injury issues there. The other thing that I thought was quite interesting was the makeup of the offensive line. It seems to be that they wanted to start off with experience, and that's, for example, I think Christian Haynes was working with the number 2 unit, and I just want to sort of keep an eye on that as we go forward, because we all kind of got to know what Pete Carroll's approach was to everything over the course of 14 years. We don't know what Ryan Grubb, Scott Huff, and Mike McDonald's approach is going to be. Are they going to bring rookies along very slowly and patiently? I'd assume that Christian Haynes was a week 1 starter lock. You drafted him in the 3rd round, your 2nd pick in the draft. Now I'm sort of interested to see how this is going to play out. Are they going to be a team that trusts rookies and throws them in? What are they going to do with Byron Murphy, for example? They have a lot of depth up front. Are they going to work him in gradually, or is he going to be asked to do a big role straight off the bat early in his first season? So little things like that I found, I think are a little bit interesting. And then the only other thought I had was, I just wish it was bloody August already or something. I mean, I thought there's a lot. I don't want to wish my life away. I'm 40 next month, so I really shouldn't be doing stuff like that. So, but I am quite eager to just get on with this now and see some football.
Yeah, I think we all can relate to that. I think that's a good place for us to start in terms of the offensive line. I think I think we can all agree that is a bellwether and a ceiling setter for this Seahawks team. And there's a few, we can kind of go along that whole line. So I want to talk about Charles Cross. There was a little tiny bit of news about Charles Cross. There's a little bit of news about Abe Lucas, and a little bit of news about the right guard position, in that, as you were alluding to, Rob, it was McClendon Curtis getting reps with the first team. Christian Haynes was second. And then I thought it's also interesting that you had Mike Jarrell and Garrett Greenfield rotating at right tackle. And from what it sounds like, Satola Mea was 3rd team. So, he was drafted ahead of those guys. I mean, Garrett Greenfield was not drafted, but I guess first thought here, and I'm curious what you guys think. One, on the McClendon Curtis thing, I'm curious if you guys have any opinion on him. My thought was, this was a guy, him and Raekwon O'Neal were 2 guys that they picked off of practice squads last year and carried them on the 53-man roster to protect them last year. They clearly saw something. John Schneider mentioned during the offseason when they signed Ankrum, the guy from the Rams, that they had guys in-house that they like better than people probably know. And I assumed they were talking about Curtis and O'Neal. And Curtis has an interesting his physical makeup is an interesting guard prospect. Do you think, is your guess right now, that McClendon Curtis is a likely contender? Now, Anthony Bradford was out with an ankle injury, so he's another person in the mix here. But do you think that McClendon Curtis has the edge over a Christian Haynes, or do you think that, just like we've seen in past years, rookies always start out 3rd team, 2nd team, and it's by mid-training camp that if they're going to take over into 1st team, it's not going to be before then? Griff, I'll start with you on that one.
For whatever reason, Seattle's backup guards end up playing a lot. I think maybe more than other teams. I don't know what the actual statistics show there. But I think Schneider's optimism there is relative to how he views most backups. So I don't think that he has a real shot of beating out Christian Haynes definitely, or Laken Tomlinson at left guard, or Bradford. I feel like he's probably in the run beneath those three. But
Can I pause you on that? Why?
Yeah.
Do you have reason behind that, or is that just a gut?
Well, I mean, I think Haynes, just speaking to Haynes, I mean, he's just really good. I mean, I'm even if it's a rough rookie year, because rookie seasons are rookie seasons, I just think he has too much pedigree working for him. Laken Tomlinson I'm not particularly high on him, especially where he's at in his career right now, but he's a serviceable left guard that stays on the field. He's been consistently what he is the past 2 or 3 seasons. And then I think Bradford I don't think he had a good year last year, but I just think he got snaps over Curtis for a reason. Mm-hmm. I mean, he did show some promise. He can move guys in the run game. So I think those are the reasons why I would have Curtis below him. But I mean, again, their backup guards seem to be playing snaps. Unfortunately for the starters, good for the backup. So Curtis would definitely be the guy that would essentially supplant the backups last year. And I think Schneider's optimism is more relative to we might end up seeing him on the field. So I feel more positive about him than I have past backup guards, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, Rob, you kind of just talked about this a little bit. I think we all assume Christian Haynes, if we're just talking about who's got the pedigree, to Griff's point, I think we all feel like Christian Haynes is the guy that we want to see ascend and believe is going to. I think my question is maybe a little bit more, is there potential higher quality in McClendon Curtis than we are giving him credit for? Is it potential that he is a better player than we know?
Well, I just had a quick look on the draft board that I had from last year. Now, I had him down as a 5th round pick. And so I think he fell because his testing was awful, but he had a good Senior Bowl. So I think that might be one of the reasons why the Seahawks have some optimism there, that they've sort of seen little flashes that they like. But I have to say, guys, I have no confidence in the Seahawks. When they say that they are confident in a guy on the offensive line, it just goes in one of my ears and flops right out of the other one straight away.
Fair.
I have absolutely no faith in this team to build an offensive line. It is a huge blind spot for them. And just when I kind of thought they might be getting on track when they invest, and I wasn't a huge Charles Cross fan. I thought he was a player who deserved to go between 20 and 40, and they took him at 9. Okay, I'm not going to complain when a team needs a left tackle and takes a left tackle in the top 10. But when they went and got Abe Lucas in round 3, I thought, if Cross works out and if Lucas works out, that's the foundation to build a really good offensive line. And then you sort of work the interior, you perhaps bring in a proven veteran, you draft another guy in future drafts, you build up your offensive line. And what has happened since that draft? They have not added an experienced sort of figurehead who's been there and done it, who can lead that offensive line on the interior. They've continued to draft players, but they've drafted them mid to late rounds. Abe Lucas sadly, his career seems to be on the line. And now it just looks like a cobbled together offensive line. It looks like there's not been any real planning or process involved. I'm very jealous. Look, the Pittsburgh Steelers they don't know what they're doing at quarterback. That's pretty obvious. But they do seem to understand how to build the trenches. And I think what they've done over the last 2 drafts, they've put together the foundation for an offensive line that could be a major positive for the team moving forward. And despite having all of this draft stock, Seahawks doing a lot of good work at other positions. But I just kind of feel like in a year's time, before the 2025 draft and before free agency, we're all going to be sat here going, what the hell are they going to do on the offensive line? Because who at the minute is a solidified plus starting player in the NFL? People keep assuming that Cross is that. It's a huge year for Charles Cross. There isn't one player on that team right now who you can hang your hat on the offensive line. And it's been that way for too long. And when guys say, I like McClendon Curtis, and it's the same guy that wanted BJ Finney, but there was 3 of them, wasn't there? I can't remember who the other 2 were in that year. They could have had Jack Conklin for the same price.
Yep.
And they brought those guys in. When those people are saying they like McClendon Curtis, I'm like, yeah, okay. Well, let's see McClendon Curtis play an NFL game, and then I might make a judgment on that.
I don't want to depress anybody, but I do want to I want to amplify your point. So I'm going to do this really quickly. I'm going to read to you every player prior to this year, not this year's draft, every player that John Schneider has drafted on the interior offensive line, not tackle. I can do that as well. It's not that much better. You guys stop me if I name anybody that's great, not good, not just a starter, but great. Damian Lewis, Reese Odiombo, John Moffitt, Anthony Bradford, Phil Haynes, Terry Poole, Mark Lewinsky, Ryan Seymour, Jared Smith, J.R. Sweezy, Ethan Posick, Joey Hunt, Christian Sokoli, and Olu Oluwatimi. That's 14 years of drafts. And there's some starters in there. But I think you can't even really, when you look at that list, say anyone that's even a clear plus starter. Lewis got a bag, hopefully, for Carolina's sake and for his sake, he turns out to be okay. Posick has played okay in Cleveland. Lewinsky had a couple years, but for the most part, I mean, that has absolutely been a blind spot for the scouting department. It's one thing to say you don't value that position. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't be able to draft quality players. If your philosophy is, hey, this is an overdrafted, overpaid position, so we're going to take it later, then you should have to prove that out by actually finding quality players later. If your track record is reinforcing that you're not, then it's time to start saying, okay, maybe we need to reevaluate this philosophy we've got about interior offensive line. Off soapbox there. Griff, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. One thing I would add of the players that you mentioned, and you can throw James Carpenter into that, the players that did kind of become plus starters, they seemed to play their best football when they went to their second team as well. Like Lewinsky was solid in Indianapolis, and I don't think we were calling him that in Seattle. I think the final maybe 2 months of Posick's Seattle career, I thought he was turning it on, but that was like in the year 4 or 5 or whatever it was. And then he gets even better in Cleveland. So, could that just be general development? Maybe. I think, though, that I wonder if they've turned a corner recently. As disappointing as Anthony Bradford was overall last year, we're still talking about a rookie. I would like to see if he can develop into something. I liked him as a prospect way more than I liked him as a rookie, relative to each. I do think Damian Lewis for a 3rd-round pick was generally a success. I think he earned that deal.
Yeah.
But then my thoughts with Cross and Lucas, I do think that Cross probably is not the top 8, whatever, left tackle franchise guy, but I do think he's still worth the draft pick. And then compared with Lucas, my main issue there is really just health. Ultimately, I think those are good moves, not great ones, but good ones relative to what you're expecting out of a 1st-round left tackle in the 3rd round or whatever, right tackle. I do think the biggest inhibitor there, though, is them staying on the field. It's just one, because healthier players play better, but then also the continuity aspect. And then I do think Haynes is kind of another data point of them turning the corner on the interior. But yeah, they still need to have a hit when you're not expecting a hit. Good drafting teams do that. Green Bay has the same rostering philosophy, and they will sit guys on the bench that they picked on early day 3 or late day 2. And they eventually end up becoming good starters, and not just good starters, but good starters at multiple positions. Like they'll play a guard at tackle, a tackle at guard, and it just works out. Hopefully Scott Huff can get those guys to where that's really starts to take hold more. But I reserve a little bit of judgment in the last 2-3 seasons because I really think these guys need to stay healthy. To me, the best this O-line has played recently, I think the first 3 months or so of 2022 was mildly above average protection. But then the rookies hit a rookie wall, and then they played terribly the final month, and then they're dinged up all of last year. And it's difficult to even evaluate at that point. But my thing is, let's get them healthy and then kind of reassess.
Well, as a case, you mentioned Green Bay, and I immediately pull up Zach Tom. Immediately pull up Zach Tom. 2022, he's drafted in the 4th round, 140th overall. the Seahawks had a pick in the 4th round. They had a pick 21 spots earlier. Who did they take? Kobe Bryant, who's an interesting player, but limited athletically. And Zach Tom is now, he's Pro Bowl level player, and I think has potential all pro. I don't know if he was even getting votes last year, but at multiple positions. And that's a guy that the Seahawks just watched go by.
A second round grade on Zach Tom in the 2022 draft. He was just behind Cole Strange on the board. I just pulled it up now. I mean, he was just a player that stood out, and I understand why he went to the 4th round because of his size. But he just seemed like a player that he was playing tackle. I think he was a Wake Forest, but ideally placed to play center. And this is the problem: is you can go throughout the years. And that's when he made a point on coaching, and that's a great point. Scott Huff, I get the sense, is going to be 20 times better than any offensive line coach they've had under Pete Carroll. And he's going to probably get this right. And I have a lot of faith in him and Ryan Grubb, who's got an offensive line background, to sort this out. But they're going to need personnel support. And they've consistently passed on players that afterwards you kind of go, what? That doesn't make any sense. Why we took him instead of him? Like 2014, I know that people often go to the Creed Humphrey example, but you could go all the way back to 2014. The Seahawks needed offensive line help there. They traded down like 5-6 spots, took Paul Richardson at receiver, and like Joel Batonio was sat right there. And then there was a number of us just banging the table. Take this guy, he can play guard, he can play tackle. He's had a really good career in Cleveland. And there's it feels like every year there's a player. Like there's others at Green. Elton Jenkins was another one with the Packers. Like there's all sorts of players. They drafted a center a couple of years ago. The center position is constantly baffling to me because even if you think, as the Seahawks clearly do, that it's just a position that you can just chuck any player into, really. Frankly, it doesn't matter who's playing there. You just get a different one every year. But that's not working. So why not spend a bit? Like they've had opportunities in the last few years to draft a center, to invest in a center. And yet who's the Indianapolis Colts center? Ryan Kelly? Yeah, Doug Baldwin was tweeting when he went off the board live during that draft that he was taken, that he was like implying that was the Seahawks guy. So like it's inconsistent that they kind of have an eye on players like that, but then we'll just sort of push it to one side for a number of years. I happen to think when the results are so consistently poor, then do something different. And like look at the Rams right now. The Rams have completely rebuilt their offensive line. They've gone, okay, you can understand
in
what
2 seasons, really.
Yeah, we are going to go big. Like they were small and athletic, and they kind of felt the league was going a different way, and they've led the charge, which is what the Seahawks used to do. They've led the charge. They are now the biggest offensive line in the NFL by a long stretch, and they have got if nothing else, I fancy them to get a yard when they need a yard. And they've lost Aaron Donald, but they've rebuilt the defensive line as well. I don't know. I kind of I love the look of Seattle's defensive line. I love what they've done there. I look at the offensive line and just think, can we swear on this? Like, oh shit! Like, look at that. It just looks cobbled together. It just looks like they've just chucked a load of things out there and let's see what works. I want to see a better plan than that.
Yes, swearing's fine, other than the F word. Trying to steer clear of that, but yeah, I think one of the things that's interesting for me is I actually think John Schneider has demonstrated some humility and awareness of flaws in their draft and personnel approach, and have made some changes over the years. But this is not one of them. And additionally, John Schneider, everything about John Schneider implies that he values toughness and strength, and that he would understand why the trenches matter as much as they do, but he doesn't draft that way. He doesn't approach free agency that way. I think the most hopeful thing I see there is it's not just been the interior offensive line that has been a blind spot. The interior defensive line has also been a spot that they have gone cheap free agents. They've had better luck there. The Colin Coles, the Ataba Rubins, the Tony McDaniels, like they've found guys that have been like even who was the guy from the Bengals that they traded for as part of the Super Bowl run?
Clint McDonald.
Clint McDonald, yes. So they've found ways to find contributors, but most of those guys were not Pro Bowl level guys. They were just, quality rotational players. But now it does feel like with Mike McDonald and this crew that they did prioritize Leonard Williams was their priority over Jordan Brooks. And I know that's a painful thing, Griff. Hopefully you'll stay with us. They prioritized Leonard Williams. They prioritized Byron Murphy when they could have gone another direction. Who knows if Pete was still around? Maybe that would be Cooper DeJean that they picked there. There are pretty good sources indicating that Cooper DeJean was super high on their list at the defensive back. They love Terry and Arnold as well. And so like that is some indication that there's a shift. Offensive line wise, I think as we all say, I think we all like Christian Haynes. And I think you also, if you want to be hopeful there, you look at the different offensive linemen that have been picked based off of who was the offensive line coach at the time. And there have been meaningful changes in the types of offensive linemen picked based off of who was the OL coach. I am hopeful about Scott Huff. I am hopeful about the fact that Ryan Grubb is an offensive line coach by trade, that we're going to start seeing at least better evaluation of players, better development of those players, and hopefully a higher prioritization of those players. But I 100% agree with you, Rob, that until I see it, we should assume the Seahawks have one of the bottom 5 offensive lines in the NFL. Like that is anything else is fooling yourself. That should be the assumption until it's proven otherwise.
Can I add one piece of irresponsible optimism?
Yeah, do it.
Because I'm with you in how we characterize what we've seen in the protection. So my pitch for the O-line is, let's get the most important guys healthy and on the field. Like, you have to start there regardless. I have not been a fan of how they've approached center, like you both. I hold an exception though with Oluwatimi. I actually think he can be something. Now, again, you have to wait and see, right? But I mean, when they drafted him, because I only watched him a little bit, I like the other centers more. When I went back and watched him at Michigan, I'm like, what separates him from Weipler or Tittman? I really don't see it. I'm not going to put him up there with John Michael Schmitz. And even JMZ had a rough rookie year just because, again, rookie interior players, it's really hard. But I think Oluwatimi can be something. I think he has the traits, and I think he has honestly the college tape where that translates in the conference he played in. So, but again, we got to wait till we see it. But he, if I'm going to identify an X factor, I think he's the guy on either side of the ball that can take a unit and make it be better than we could have fathomed.
I'm glad you brought that up. I do want to spend a little time on him. I had a note there to go there, and you took us there. I will say, I want to hear from each of you. Like, so we just heard from Griff about Oluwatimi. I might come back to you for a little bit more, but come to you as well, Rob. Here's where I am on Oluwatimi. I think he's very projectable. Like, I think he's a high floor center. And by that, I mean, I think he is going to be a solid pass protector. I don't think he is weak in pass protection the way a lot of the centers I've seen the Seahawks bring in. And to some extent, that was supported by the fact that he had the #1 pass protection grade of all rookie linemen, period, last year of any position, which is something. And my issue with Oluwatimi is I don't see the strength in his lower body for run blocking. So I have a little concern about that. And I have a little concern about bull rush, like being a little bit overpowered in terms of collapsing the pocket. But he seems smart. He seems like gritty, which is an important element for a center. It's kind of a grinded out position. My big question is, I want to hear these like whispers that, oh, he had a big offseason. He's much bigger, especially thicker in the lower half than he was last year. I think that will be an indicator to me that I'm like, okay, he can be a good player. I'm not sure I see great from him, but I think he's a relatively high floor guy. Rob, where are you on Oluwatimi?
Well, I'd have been round 4 when they drafted him in round 5. I had a reasonable list of players ahead of him, and sadly, the Seahawks had him seemingly, and was it Jake Andrews, per the article that came out through the team's official website, that they were identifying those 2 players, and Andrews went first, and then they took Oluwatimi. I had Andrews in round 5, and I kind of thought last year, why, with all these picks, why did they not take somebody early? And when I was watching Oluwatimi, he was steady, at Michigan. He didn't make many mistakes. but you'd never watched him and thought that's the trait that will make him a great NFL center. And the question with him, and this is why he lasted to round 5, despite the fact he very rarely gave any pressures or sacks up in college. I think he won the award for the best defensive lineman in his final year at Michigan, which I think was a bit of a reach, but okay, is because he was pretty much Mr. Consistency for Michigan, never gave anything away. But you just wonder, when you are playing those bigger, faster, stronger players, does he have the physical tools to do the same kind of thing where you just don't notice him, which was what he was at Michigan. He was just a player they didn't notice. If they're going to start him at center, one thing I was hoping they were going to do was take Zach Zinter and put him next to him, and maybe even take Trevor Keegan as well and say, you three have played together. That's an award-winning offensive line the season before last. You've got chemistry. Go and get after it. And Michigan's offensive line is the closest thing to an NFL offensive line that we've seen in college football over the last few years, coached by Harbaugh. So I was quite keen on that. They haven't done that. So it's, again, it could be a new center, 2 new guards next to him. I think his performance could easily be impacted by the fact that the players next to him don't know him. And he doesn't, it's a new scheme that he's going to have to learn this offseason, which will be difficult for a second-year pro. So his performance might be impacted by things that are out of his control and not just down to his talent. So I have a little bit of fear for him. But look, he was Mr. Consistency in college. I just think the Seahawks missed a trick. I thought there were better players than him available at some of their picks earlier. They didn't take them. Let's see what he can do, because it's either him or Nick Harris, isn't it? Or they're going to shove somebody else in there. But it's not a great offering as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I still like Christian Haynes a little bit as another. Like, in my ideal world, I still think Christian Haynes at center and 2 other guards emerging would be ideal. But I think that's not going to happen. But I do think that could be a really, all of a sudden, a special set of folks. And I'm not sure I see special as a possibility for Oluwatimi. Griff, anything else you wanted to call out on Oluwatimi in terms of like what you like about him or what gives you optimism about him moving into that role?
Well, one thing specific, sure. I mean, he's a really good pre-snap communicator, but post-snap communicator with his guards. So like, you're not giving up free rushers off stunts and loops, stuff like that. He's very alert to that. Head on a swivel. He keeps really level, like horizontally with his adjacent guards. So you don't give up a lot of free production to the D-line with him. So yeah, especially against OSU, I thought he just there's so much administrative procedural stuff the center has to handle, and he didn't make it easy for OSU's D-line, because they can match them in talent anyway in the trenches, D-line versus O-line. So that's definitely a positive. And Seattle's had a lot of issues with handling stunts and getting free rushers. So I definitely think for a young guy, that's at least one positive to really hang your hat on with him. And then we'll see what the traits can do in time.
Rob, you also mentioned another player that I've done a full show just on Charles Cross alone. I also did a show yesterday about who's on the hot seat for the Seahawks this year, and he was the number 2 guy put there. I see this as a pivotal year for Charles Cross. This is his 3rd year, right, in the NFL. He has not distinguished himself relative to his class he has. He's one of the better tackles of that class, but who cares if the rest of them are not very good? There's some news that he has bulked up quite a bit. And I don't know if you saw the video. This is like off-season typical stuff, but they were doing a for funsies thing where they're tossing a medicine ball over their heads to see how far they could throw it. Charles Cross just blew everybody away with his toss. Fine, whatever. Let's just
top 10 pick.
Yeah, exactly. Do you believe that this is a make or break season for Charles Cross? And by that I mean, if he does not perform better than he did the first 2 years, that this team should and will start looking for another left tackle.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, look, the fact that they're even talking about bringing Jamal Adams back makes me think, no, they're not going to think that way. They're going to see this through to the end and maybe just try and convince themselves that Cross is a definite answer. But he's not shown enough in these first 2 years. And I've been a bit encouraged, Brian, that you've talked about it. I've talked about it. Ray Roberts was talking about him needing to become the voice. But even within the piece that Ray Roberts was kind of calling him out, he said, he's been really good the last 2 years. And I'm thinking, oh, this is fake news. Like, for the last 2 years, he's been okay. He's not been terrible. I'm not suggesting he is. But he's given up some lousy sacks, some lousy pressures. He has not been consistently good. He's not got the look. Like, you watched Andrew Thomas playing for the Giants. You just knew straight away he looked the business. And when you watch Cross, you just think, he's okay. Like, he's fine. He's not a liability. It's not like they're playing Stone Forsythe out there. But he's not also somebody that you want to spend millions on a second contract right now. So it's time for him to deliver. And I feel like I've heard for 2 years, he's got bigger. It's like, okay, fine. You needed to be stronger in year one. I'll give you a pass for year one. But you weren't stronger last year. Everybody could see what his issues were at Mississippi State. He's got great feet. That's why his nickname was something like Sweet Feet or something at Mississippi State. Everybody could see that he had great footwork. But he just kept blowing off the ball too much. And I want to see some anchor. I want to see him be the aggressor. There's nothing more frustrating to me than an offensive lineman who's passive, who will wait for somebody else to initiate contact on them and then tries to counter, or is just all their purpose is to get into position with their athleticism, but doesn't have a mean streak. My ideal 1 to 5 on your offensive line is the kind of player that is just going to be horrible to play against. And Charles Cross is not horrible to play against. So I'm absolutely delighted for him that he can throw a medicine ball further than an undrafted free agent or a late round pick. I want to see you hit Jared Verse in the face whenever you're playing the Rams next season. I want to see some aggression, some anger. I do want to see you be the guy. When Ray Roberts is saying, Abe Lucas was the guy, not you, Charles Cross, you should take that personally, because Abe Lucas has got that about him. He's a
tougher player. He's got a little piss and vinegar in him for sure.
Exactly. And yet Cross has not had that. So yes,
and
you're absolutely right.
Griff, to this point, we talk about, I think a lot of people think about Charles Cross, and a common refrain when you say, well, he hasn't been good enough. I'm not saying you. When I say that, common refrain is, well, look at Ekwonu from Carolina, or look at Evan Neal from the Giants, who are picked ahead of him. They both stink. Fine. Well, that's true. They did good relative to those tackles, but Charles Cross was the 6th ranked offensive tackle from his draft class just last year in pass blocking. The Packers had 2, not 1, but 2 players rated higher than him. One was Rasheed Walker. The other was Zach Tom. And then you've got Bernard Raymond from the Colts, who is over 80 in his grade. You've got Braxton
Age
from Chicago, who is also over him. And you've got Luke Godecki in Tampa Bay that was over him. So these are all guys that you could have had. And I don't like, doesn't really matter the could have had game. But the point being is, he's not good enough. He has not even been in the top half of the tackles drafted. Well, I guess technically he is literally at the halfway point of the tackles drafted in his class last year. What's the reason? Like, do you have, is there something you want to see from him this year on film that you didn't see from him last year that you think is a realistic next step that he can take?
I'm with you guys that it hasn't been good enough. We want it to be better. I hate to keep saying the same thing. I really do think that injuries impacted his functional play strength this past year. I do think that he finished the season stronger than he did even before he got nicked up earlier in the year. But that's a small sample size, right? We're talking like 4 or 5 games. So we want to see it for the whole season. One thing I will say, though, is that when I watched him at Mississippi State, I don't remember, did he come out as a true senior? Was he a 4-year college player?
I think he was a junior. I think he had 3 years.
Yeah, he was younger than that.
Okay.
I think he's just 23 now.
Okay. Yeah. So I did notice that in his sophomore year, no surprise. I mean, play strength was like a straight up a problem for him. And then his junior year, it caught up to his league. I don't think he's even though he's on the smaller side, even with that, because of his age as well, I don't think his play strength, whether weight room strength or just, like functional strength on the field, has caught up to the NFL yet. So I would identify year 3 for him as a big year for that to happen. And then with that, everything else will come. I do think, though, that he was trying to figure out from what I think I saw, he was trying to figure out his pass sets. He did set differently in his second year than he did his first year. His first year, he would mix it up more. He would try to kind of play the game within the game. And especially toward the end of the year, like you can't do that against NFL edge rushers just because they're so much more seasoned than the college players. In the second year, he was way more, you might say, robotic in an intentionally good way. But he wasn't as reactive to inside moves, and he was giving up inside moves, even though in ways that he didn't in college or his first year as a rookie. So, and then toward the end, it was like, okay, he's adjusted to this. So I do think we're still witnessing a development track, like a very real, like there's an arc going on here. Mm-hmm. And I think it was he and we were starting to see the vision toward the very end, but again, a small sample size. So we need to see how he continues to develop. And then also this supposed weight gain, hopefully comes with that more NFL play strength. I think those are variables, but I mean, there's a very real shot that he continues to grow. I think that's realistic that he does. Doesn't mean it will happen. But yeah,
I hope so. And the 2 bits that I'm grasping to, because at this point it's grasping until we see it on the field, but that I'm at least looking at and hopeful about are, one, Ryan Grubb, one of the first players he mentioned when he got this job was Charles Cross. Like, he sees something special in him as left tackle. I was like, okay, good. Hopefully you do. And 2, Scott Huff, if there's one thing he is known for, I mean, Rob, you talked to him, you interviewed Troy Fautanu. When Fautanu talked about Huff on Brock and Salk, and you hear other players from that line, the number one thing that Scott Huff preaches is finishing. Now, that might not be unique with offensive line. It's like head coaches saying, turn the ball over. Like, we value takeaways, of course. But if you watch the Huskies offensive line play, there was a nastiness there was a physicality to the way they approached their jobs. And so, as much as I actually liked Andrew Dickerson, I thought he was a pretty good O-line coach. And I thought he did, like, some of the things he was able to accomplish with pretty crappy personnel, I thought was pretty impressive. I don't know that he was ever like the most physical offensive line coach in terms of the types of players or the types of schemes that they were running. And I think that Scott Huff hopefully will ingrain in Charles Cross, and with Christian Haynes, who is already very clearly a physical player at guard, maybe some of this starts to rub off. Maybe they start to get a little bit of that grit that, frankly, if you watch that Pittsburgh game last year, that game is going to be stuck in a lot of our heads until they expunge it, because they were just overpowered on both sides of the line, and Charles Cross was dominated in that game. And it wasn't necessarily by TJ Watt. It was
the other guy, yeah,
Highsmith or whatever, who's on the other side. So anyway, that leads me to another topic that's related to this, because I think Cross fits on this list. But I wanted to ask both of you, there are these pivotal players on this roster. The Seahawks roster is not fully evolved yet. It's not where it needs to be yet. But there are players on this roster that are kind of like, they will, if they hit, the Seahawks ceiling increases significantly, and their odds of becoming an interesting team increase. If they don't, then the Seahawks are in a rough spot. And so Charles Cross, to me, I think we've just talked about him. He's clearly one of those guys. I'm curious for both of you, who else is on that list? You know, not looking for an exhaustive list, but a couple of guys that come to mind for you that are pivotal on this roster to kind of be bellwethers about how this roster is progressing. Rob, I'm going to come to you first on that one.
Oh, the obvious one is obviously the quarterback. Geno Smith, it's the most important individual position in world sport. So, if your quarterback plays very well, then you have a great chance of having a very good season. And I know that it's not just on him, that there's all sorts of different things, scheme, teammates, offensive line, opponents that you face that will have an impact to quarterback's performance. But ultimately, if how he plays, I think it's going to be fascinating to see how he plays within the new scheme. It is a scheme that suits physical characteristics that he has. They want to attack every blade of grass. I also get the feeling that he isn't the sort of the player that I think John Schneider envisages, the type of player that John Schneider envisages running his offense. I think he wants somebody more like Favre, who's kind of like a bit scrambling all over the place, mad, crazy, extended plays, launching it downfield. I mean, that's kind of, he's traded for Sam Howell, and that's how Sam Howell plays. So, I think he has a lot to prove, but ultimately he's got so many weapons. He's actually got a proper offensive coordinator now, and it's going to be interesting to see how he plays. So I'm sorry to steal that one from everybody else, but that is the obvious. I suppose that's the obvious one. And then I think, look, the other important one for me is Leonard Williams, simply because I had no issues with re-signing Leonard Williams. I understood it was going to be expensive. I wanted them to sign him because I want a great defensive line. But now that you've signed him, he needs to be good. He has to produce, and a couple of sacks and most games you barely notice him not playing isn't going to be up there. And I think he played a lot better at the end of the season than some people gave him credit for. I think he was quite impactful. I felt like if you really studied the defensive line, you noticed him, even if everybody else was playing like crap. So I do think that he's got something there, but given they've invested so much in him now, he has to deliver, as does DK Metcalf, as do all of the players that they've invested a lot of money in. They are tight against the cap at the minute and will be next season. They've got some big decisions to make. So the guys that are actually earning a lot of money have to play very well. That's no different to the Vancouver Canucks, who I've just been watching in the playoffs. Their best players didn't turn up in the playoffs. They're now sat at home watching the Edmonton Oilers play the Dallas Stars. The Seahawks need their expensive, big name players to justify their price tags.
Griff, who are the top couple for you? Who are two that you have not heard yet?
I think what swings the fortune of the team is guard play being better than it was. So I guess Haynes being everything we want him to be is just huge. And then you probably have, barring health, like status quo play elsewhere. If you're comparing this year to last year, at least along the interior. But another player who is just really important that he puts it all together is Tariq Woolen. Because if he does, then, well, that's great, because now you're talking about a top 7, top 10 cornerback. But then that solidifies the entire cornerback room as probably being top 5. And from there, McDonald can scheme accordingly to offset potential weaknesses elsewhere in his back 7. And I think that's what he'll need to do to kind of to get the most out of the 2024 roster. I think that's really important. The more he can lean on his corners, the less stress he has to put on his interior players in the back 7 and maximize them and truly optimize them. It will be really difficult to get that, optimal relationship between his floor players and his ceiling players in the back 7 if the cornerback room isn't behaving like a ceiling level position group. And that will be really dependent on Tariq Woolen kind of putting it all together, which is really, we're talking like zone assignments, one-on-one coverage, whether man or even the one-on-one coverage within zone, like cover 3 quarters. Something goes vertical or breaks out where you're effectively playing man, but it's when he's tasked with multiple routes where he's liable to bust stuff. So yeah, I'll go Haynes having an exceptional rookie year, and then Tariq Woolen putting it all together finally.
Those are 2 great ones, and there was some news, at least take it for what it's worth, but Mike Salkamore, Dooley from 710, said that Tariq Woolen looked noticeably thicker when they saw him, and this is a guy that is pretty pretty spindly before. So and also, if there's anything that was bad in his game, it was his run support and his willingness to take on tackles, and also his body did not hold up when he did choose to take on tackles. This is a guy that Cody Alexander, when I had him on, has him as the number 2 rated man cover corner in the NFL behind only Sauce Gardner. But you talk about run defense, he's one of the worst. And so if he does not figure that out this year, I don't know that he's got a spot. But if he does, then to your point, you've really got something for Mike Macdonald to work with as far as a chess piece and not a liability. I see that face, Rob. You have something you want to say there about Mr. Woolen?
No. I just found it really frustrating to watch last year. So it was just bringing flashbacks.
Yes,
he's very good at celebrating in Arizona, though. He was very energetic then.
Maturity is there are whispers about his maturity and his professionalism and how much he's tuned into that stuff. So I don't get the feeling Mike Macdonald's going to be sweeping that stuff under the rug. I don't think Mike Macdonald's going to look at a 40 time or a number of interceptions and just accept that. I think he is going to hold a higher bar for how people conduct themselves. And I think it's time for it. So I'll add a couple other names to the list. Woolen was on my list as well. I would add 2 guys. JSN. JSN is a guy that I think had a acceptable rookie year, maybe even a little bit above that. I think that I expect Tyler Lockett to be taking further steps back in his production. And this was the number 1 targeted receiver on this team. DK Metcalf, I expect to be essentially DK Metcalf. Maybe he's got a little bit of variability up or down there, but I'm not expecting him to all of a sudden become the top receiver in the NFL. But he can still be a top 20 kind of guy. But JSN has to take a real step forward for this receiver room to be ready to continue to progress. Otherwise, we're going to see Lockett recede at a faster rate than JSN progresses, and the overall room will suffer. So I think JSN is a pretty critical one. I'm pretty hopeful that he will, but I think that's one that's important this year. And the other one I call out is Devin Witherspoon, who might be the best player on the team. But I think for this roster to be relevant, not necessarily even just this year, but future years, Devin Witherspoon needs to not just be a good corner or a Pro Bowl corner. He needs to be a guy that is in the conversation for the best at the position. Ideally, he gets as close as possible to being a defensive player of the year candidate. Like, that's a huge step from where he was last year. Mm-hmm. But there were glimpses of that level of impact. And if Mike Macdonald can get that kind of performance from him, the ripple effect everywhere else on that defense would be huge. So look, I mean, we could keep going on. Byron Murphy, like, there's a number of these guys that fit into this. Boye Mafe, like, we talked about my parlay at the beginning of the show, and there's a reason parlays, are popular, because the odds when they hit are, it's amazing. You get a great payout, but they often, most of the time, they don't hit. And so the Seahawks roster is a parlay, like, it's like a 15, 20 person parlay at this point of young guys that you need to see take that next step. If you were to just look at all the names we've talked about, and you can feel free to throw someone else in there, and let's throw out the vets. Let's just look at the young guys that are going to be part of the next 3 to 5 years. Who are the most pivotal? Like, give me 2 guys, or if you want, just one, but like, who are the guys that just have to be at the top end of their variance for the Seahawks to be interesting? Rob?
Well, I mean, I think that Jackson Smith-Njigba is going to have an exceptional season. I think he just showed enough quality, and I think the way that he spoke at the end of the season said a lot. And I think everybody knows what I'm referring to there, the interview that he did where he basically threw Shane Waldron under the bus. I think that when you watch Washington play and the way that they had Rome Odunze as a fantastic 1v1 option and then used their other players to create opportunities for him. And then when teams had to pay a little bit more attention to Romadunze, it equally created other opportunities for the other two top receivers on their team. I just think that's going to be it just suits perfectly what the Seahawks have. And I think DK is going to have an opportunity to have an unbelievable jump this year. He's got to take it, though. He's going to get it. He's going to get probably more targets than he ever got. He's got to win those 1v1s. And Jackson Smith and Jigba, I think I am probably more confident that he's going to take the kind of jump he needs because he can run across the middle. He's got great agility. He can separate. He's got natural hands. He can run downfield. He's very difficult to cover. When he runs deep, he's not the quickest guy, but he can, win those strangely 1v1s. I just think he's going to be such a dynamic player. I think there's probably... I'd probably put him amongst the 10 players who are most likely to sort of, in the whole league, make a big jump this year. So I'm incredibly optimistic about him. But, to answer the actual question you asked, I think it probably is Cross and Witherspoon just because they're the top 10 picks. You could probably throw Murphy into that as well because he was just outside that and JSN too. But I do think if you take a player top 5, you need them to become a foundational player. Like you said, not a good player. They need to be the kind of player that everybody else wants. The other 31 teams wish they had Devin Witherspoon. How does that happen? Probably isn't going to happen at outside corner for him. It's probably going to be Mike McDonald turning him into somebody who, like when everyone talks about Cal Hamilton, you need like Aiden Dirty to get a job as a head coach in 2 years. And everyone go, okay, who's Devin Witherspoon in this draft for Aiden Dirty? Like where everyone was doing with Kyle Hamilton. That's the kind of player he has to become. And I think we've got the perfect head coach in Seattle to enable him to do that. And Cross, for all of the reasons we've talked about as well. If he can turn into a franchise left tackle, what a huge thing that becomes for the Seahawks, that you don't have to worry about that position for the next 6 years, at least. So they're the two for me that have the young players that really need to be great.
I love that. Griff, who are your two?
Just two. I would probably. I mean, it's hard to. Who would you isolate? I'll go Abraham Lucas. I think if him playing just instead of being like a serviceable average player to actually being like a certifiably like good right tackle, that does a lot for. That does a lot for offensive lines around the league. It's usually teams talk about the right tackles and just wanting competence there, but the very few teams that actually have like a high-end player there. And he has the traits, and he's definitely had some stretches where he has given high-end play. That can really transform an offensive line and then thus the offense, because then defenses can't try to just pick on one tackle because a lot of edge rushers can play both sides. So I think Lucas staying healthy again and then playing up to his potential would pay huge dividends. And then the other one would be just to kind of give a different answer. I'll go Jerome Baker. Jerome Baker, he's not old, but he's not young either, but he's like, what is he, 27?
Yeah. If that.
Like so I did not like his 2023 season. I thought it was kind of messy, but I think that can be sourced to Vic Fangio. It seems like Fangio's just given up on having his linebackers do anything of importance and what he's wanting from them. I don't know why that is, because when I think of Vic Fangio defenses, I think Navarro Bowman and Patrick Willis before I think of anybody. But nonetheless, his 2022, I mean, he's got traits, and I think his tape was solid. Like nothing better than that, but like solid. I'll take that. And so with McDonald coaching, I think he can actually make him. I think there's potential there. I don't know how likely it is, but there's potential that he could actually be a difference maker and not just like a floored player, as I was saying. I think he has the potential to be something more than that. And ideally, he plays his way to where they're saying, all right, let's move him to Mike and task him with even more. So him playing beyond what we are forecasting for him, but what is still attainable would be huge for the middle of the defense, I think.
Yeah, I think that makes sense and is interesting. For me, it's Cross 100%. He's like, if he doesn't hit, it's a big hole to try to find. Like left tackles don't grow on trees, and if he does, it's a huge check mark that they don't have to go back. So I think absolutely the top of the list for me. And Byron Murphy, like I didn't name it as one of the two that I picked up, but I think given how this team has been developed and where there's been gaps and where this team has lost so many games, they need Byron Murphy to be a dude on the interior defensive line. And if both of those guys hit, I feel like a lot of other things reduce in importance if those two guys hit. And let's cross our fingers there. I had one more set of questions. One more question, really. Do you guys have a few more minutes?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm good.
You good? All right. So I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about, you guys are the drafts and personnel kind of evaluators of the crew. So in the past, the Seahawks have had UDFAs make the squad. And I think the easy question is, who are the UDFAs, the undrafted free agents that you feel like are going to make it? Honestly, I think that's too easy. I'm going to raise the difficulty bar here. I want to ask you guys, of the UDFAs, which one or two, you can name however many you want, but which one or two do you think are going to actually get snaps this year? Actually play on the 53-man roster, on the active game day roster, and get in the game on the field. Like Jake Bobo last year would be an example of a guy that did that. Are there guys that stand out? And Rob, I'll start with you on that one.
That is an interesting question. So I'm just having a look through the list now.
Yeah, as you look through it, I mean, part of the thing here is not only evaluating whether you like the guys. Like I'll give you one that I think will make the roster, but I don't think is going to play snaps. George Halani, I think, is going to make the roster. I think there's a very clear path for him at running back to make the roster. I don't think he's going to get on the field unless there's injuries. So that would, for me, does not hit the list.
See, I think he's got a chance because the Seahawks always have injuries at running back. And
it's fair.
There's only really Kenny McIntosh other than the main two. And when I watched Halani, I just thought you basically watch like two runs and you thought, yeah, that's the Seahawks running back. So I can see them really rating him. And, he sort of, when you sort of started talking through the question, I thought, well, one of my answers is going to be George Halani. And then I was trying to sort of see who the
we shouldn't all agree on things. It's too boring. So you can go any direction you want.
So, I mean, look, I think that one option could be, I guess, Easton Gibbs, just because of the things we've talked about with linebacker depth not being great. But then I think my other answer would be, and again, I'm stealing the obvious answers here, so I'm making it harder for Griff. But Jack Westover, just because he knows the coordinator, he knows the offense, and I know that they have obviously 3 tight ends ahead of him, but is there a chance that a fourth, he's a special teams guy, therefore is active most weeks, and that there is a play or two during the middle of the season where Jack Westover is on the field, catches a pass. I don't know, maybe Gino will channel his inner Michael Penix and throw a pass 4 yards away from Jack Westover's hands, and he will somehow make a catch and convert a third down. I don't know. I just feel that there's a chance that might happen if he can warrant a regular role on special teams. So I'm already sort of seeing in the chat people throwing names out there that make me think I should have gone with something else. But there we go. I'm going to go with those two, Westover and the running back from Boise State.
Griff, you're welcome to pick the same names. There's no rule you have to pick different names.
Yeah, Westover, I definitely agree with. I could totally see Halani. I think so. My favorite undrafted free agent that they signed was Nelson Caesar. I think as it stands right now, he's probably like edge 5. If we're including Draymond Jones on the as a true edge and not just like a defensive lineman, quote unquote, where he can play anything, maybe that makes him edge 6. But in the event that they cut Darrell Taylor and just to kind of like let him cut him loose and let him sign somewhere else, I could definitely see him getting on the 53, and teams' fourth edges get maybe play 100 snaps, maybe fewer. So he's one guy I could fathom. Garrett Greenfield, I mean, I don't know. He's intriguing, but how is he going to get any snaps, right? I just don't see that. I do like Hayden Hatton, but I see him as a practice squad candidate and as a future special teamer. So I can't go with him. So I go with Caesar to add to the chorus of Helani and Westover.
Yeah, those are the guys that jumped out to me. And I get where you're coming from on Helani. I think he's one of the clearest projections to make the roster because they don't have a lot of other options at the running back spot. I also, with Westover, I'm curious. I see him as a little bit more of like an H-back type of player potentially at the NFL level than as a pure tight end. I'm just not sure he's big enough to be a tight end in the NFL. I'm wondering if they'll use him as like a use check kind of player. I'm curious if you guys see that at all, or am I just like crazy coming up with stuff?
That's when I interviewed him. That was the player that he mentioned that he thinks he can be. Yeah.
I should act like I heard that interview because I listened to all your stuff, Rob. I didn't actually hear that, but that's fascinating. I mean, I think that projects for him as potentially a really interesting role. If they can figure out a way for him to, and that would definitely be something that would get snaps because they got no one else to fill that. Nick Bellore, no longer around. Griff, do you see that?
Yeah, at the very least, he's the Fant understudy in terms of being the flex move around guy. I could totally see them putting him up in the backfield. He was already kind of used as the guy that would split across behind the formation when they'd run like split zone where the tight end runs the opposite direction of the zone flow. They definitely want to put him in the slot, and occasionally we'll see Juice check in the slot. He ran a lot of option routes for Grubb at UW. Fant will be soaking up most of those among the tight ends, but I could definitely see Westover circulating in there as well. And those guys are off the line of scrimmage, so that means you can shift and motion them around. So that definitely ties right into aligning as an H-back, even as a true fullback occasionally here and there to be the true move piece. So yeah, I could definitely see that.
All right. Well, I mean, I've got a million more questions, but I'll save it just a couple here. I'm curious. We spent a lot of time, I think, in general, Seahawks fans have been focusing on Mike Macdonald defense, and for good reason. That's what he's known for. The Ryan Grubb, Scott Huff stuff, we've talked a lot about it today, but I don't think there's been a lot of talk about what we're expecting, how the offense is going to change. And I'm curious, Griff, if you've been digging in anymore from an X's and O's perspective about how you think, if you've looked at his offense a little bit more, if you started to decide who you think is going to be most affected, if there's storylines as we start to get closer to training camp that you're going to be paying attention to for utilization of players on offense.
Yeah, it's a really good offense. And ultimately the thing that I don't know, extract from watching Grubb is that he has players with certain skill sets, and then he also has college football realities. And he is scheming with those constraints, and not constraint is the wrong word because it kind of has a negative connotation to it. But so translating his college offense to the NFL, it's not necessarily going to translate note for note, but what will translate is him using the realities of the NFL to his advantage and the realities of his skill players to try to find that optimal concoction of plays and everything. So these aren't concerns. They're more like questions, like sincere questions. His drop back game at UW. So that means not when he's not going deep, when he's not running quick game, when he's not using play action. So what does the 5-step, 7-step offense look like? If you were to just chart it and write down the amount of unique plays, the conceptual breadth is fairly narrow. And that's in part because he didn't really need it to be any more beefed up than it was, because just they were executing the shit out of it. Penix is making every throw. Receivers are winning every route. The O-line is protected. I mean, he didn't need more than choice, mesh, a constraint to mesh, and then like sail dig, where it's like a 3-level flood and then a backside dig route. He didn't need anything more than that. So why spend time installing it? If you look at their statistics in that bucket, they're average in terms of EPA per target and success rate. that doesn't reflect in the aggregate because they are obscenely elite at quick game. They're obscenely elite going deep, obscenely elite at play action. So my question is, again, I don't mean that rhetorically and like I'm secretly concerned. It's more like, what does he infuse into his playbook that previously wasn't there, so that when it's time to get chunk gains in the 10 to 20 yard range, when he knows NFL defenses are going to understand, like, okay, they're going to run weak choice here, or they're just going to run mesh. When it's time to throw in more to that, what is it going to look like? And I'm really excited to see what his take on the NFL is with regards to that. I think that bringing in Jake Peetz from the Rams is a really good just voice to have. Him also having play calling experience, I think, is really good. Not that Grubb needs help, but so much to have someone on his staff to delegate to who's very familiar with NFL realities. And as I think about that, I think about, okay, the Grubb offense, even accounting for the Grubb UW offense translating to the NFL, and then if you say like 75% Grubb, 25% McVay, what does that end up looking like? And what my mind goes to is kind of not the 2021 Bucs, but the 2022 Bucs with Bruce Arians and Tom Brady, where Arians he's adapting from having Carson Palmer level arm talent down to 2022 Tom Brady arm talent, where he can still sling it, but he's just not popping off 50 yards downfield the way he was even the year prior. Geno Smith has throw power, but he doesn't have Michael Penix's throw power. What he does have is Tom Brady level accuracy, though, a little more accurate than Penix, and you can still go downfield with him. But it's the more the possession oriented stuff. When it's time to get more possession oriented, that's where I think that Bucs offense is what they'll end up looking like. And I'm to see what the more conceptual diversity looks like as Grubb transitions to the next level. So,
yeah, one guy that's kind of under the radar that I have my eye on, I'm curious if either of you are intrigued as well, is Laviska Shenault. I don't think he is a great player. I'm not saying he's going to come in and blow things up, but his profile of player, like the Seahawks have not had someone who they could throw a bubble screen to that you have reason to believe he could actually do something with it for a while. Like DK at times, Tyler, no, JSN, that's not really his game, but that is really the only game that Laviska Shenault brings to the table. I'm wondering if he is someone that might be getting more snaps than people expect. Everyone's talking Jake Bobo, and I understand it, but there's a specific way that Shenault could be used that I'm not sure there's another player on the roster that makes as much sense for. Either of you bite on that one?
Well, I mean, I always felt he was quite overrated when he was at Colorado.
Well, that's proven to be true.
Yeah, I'm not really surprised his career's going to go the way it is. I always thought he was, for me, he's a gimmick player, like in the bubble screen stuff and, runs out of the backfield. I almost wonder, to me, he's somebody that I'm intrigued to see if they've got a plan for him. A package with him, almost to act a bit like there was a period where Deebo Samuel, until Deebo Samuel said stop doing this, where they were kind of using him as a bit of a running back and as a bit of a receiver. And I wonder if they could do something like that without any of the constraints of feeling like we're using a very expensive receiver as a running back, and he doesn't like it and he might fall out with us. So, and he's got an injury history. So I'm intrigued by that. Can I just add something on Grubb as well? I mean, I'm really excited to see what he's going to do here. Like just the Shenault with everything. I mean, to speak to two Washington guys and have them both use language like he is a mad scientist, to have the offensive lineman say, hey, he caught us all off guard. In this season, we returned and he said, right, we're not running the ball we did last year. We're completely changing everything because I feel like there's a trend to exploit here with the opponents we're facing. So we're going to just throw everything out and start again. That willingness to do that, to sort of look at the lay of the land of the NFL and completely change things. I mean, maybe he won't do that in the NFL, but he did at college. To embrace that kind of stuff rather than, it felt a bit like at times over the last few years, this was going to bang in the head against a wall, trying to do these things, trying to say what their identity was, but then not executing it and then trying to manage things on the fly. I just kind of get the thing that Ryan Grubb's going to go, okay, we're playing this opponent. That's their weakness over there. So we're going to exploit that this week. And then next week, it might be this team can't defend the run. So we're going to run it 40 times. All those things that you shout at the screen going, you know, I've Curtis Allen does some great sort of pre-game articles for me. And he goes, right, the opponent they're playing this week, these are what his weaknesses are. And then we'd sit there and watch the game and go, okay, they've done nothing to exploit any of those. And then after the game, we'd talk about it. And you think, I think Grubb's going to do a better job of that. And the other interesting thing with Grubb is, I spoke to somebody who, a source at Washington, and they basically made it clear that Ryan Grubb is not a shrinking violet, that he's the opposite of Shane Waldron, that he's not going to be for everybody. And you are not going to be for him. Everybody's not going to be for him. So it's going to be really interesting to see how having somebody whose personality is going to be so strong leading this offense, some players are going to thrive and some are going to sink. And I am really interested to see. And I think those who thrive are going to be really, really good. And the ones who don't ain't going to be here very long. I don't think they're going to wait around. It's going to be his show. And, Griff mentioned Pete, who's come over from LA. I also think that is an inspired move by the Seahawks. I think they brought him in part because they're preparing, if Grubb does really well, he has got head coach potential within a couple of years. And they want somebody on the staff who they can promote potentially to be an offensive coordinator in 2 years, if that happens. They had to think ahead of that because there's always a danger that you're going to lose your offensive coordinator in the modern NFL. And I think the Seahawks are ahead of the curve on that one in getting somebody in who could be the heir apparent before he's even taken his first game as an offensive coordinator. So I think well done to the Seahawks for that.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the fact that it's a little detail, but my ears perked up a little bit when Mike McDonald was talking after the first day. Might have been either rookie minicamp or maybe it's OTAs. And he said, yeah, we went back and looked at the film and the offensive guys pick up different things than we do. And it sounds like, well, of course they do. Like, of course they should. But Mike McDonald's pretty detail oriented. And I think he picks up a lot of things on all sides of the ball. I also believe that when he was doing interviews for OC, I think that I would have loved to have been in the room for that, because I think the types of questions that he could go back and forth schematically on or strategically on or tactically on with an OC, I think are some of the best in the NFL. And for him to get the answers he probably was really looking for should make everyone feel a lot more confident. I don't think Waldron would have done well in an interview with Mike McDonald. I think there would have been a lot of stumbling. I think there would have been a lot of generic answers that were okay, but not special. And I think Ryan Grubb is a different level of leader. And I think that's what you're getting to, Rob. And you'd love a leader to lead everybody. But if you're going in a direction, not everybody's going to follow. And so I'd rather somebody with a very strong sense of who they are and what they want and what they don't want than somebody who's just trying to be everything for everybody and figure it out and please the coach and please, like, that's not who Ryan Grubb is. And so I do feel very, very encouraged about the coaching staff in general and the fact that we are going to get on both sides of the ball a filtering happening where it's like there's now a bar that's being raised and an expectation level that's being raised that not everyone's going to cross that bar, and the Seahawks will churn through some guys. Hopefully they don't. Hopefully everyone jumps to it. But I'm happy to hear Mike McDonald say, yeah, people were having communication problems. Yeah, we weren't happy with how there were some mistakes being made, and we're going to slow down until they get it right. I think all those things are good signs of we're not just going to accept mediocrity. And that's not to crap on Pete Carroll. I don't want to bring all that up. I just am excited about this new direction and this new perspective that's been brought in. All right. Before I let you guys go, I want to hear if you guys have things you're looking for coming up for the Seahawks, things that you've got on your shows or things people can pay attention to that you've got on your sites or anything coming up. So Griff, anything for you coming up that people should keep an eye out for?
Yes, soon after this, I'll be watching tape with Maddie over at Seattle Overload. We're going to break down DJ James and Nehemiah Pritchett, so we're going to get into that. And I haven't watched enough tape on them to really have any original opinions, so my opinions will be formulated live for all to see if you're interested. So
I've got one opinion for you that's not an opinion; it's just a reality. They have the smallest hands I've ever seen. I couldn't believe when I started looking at their hand size, and they're like second percentile. Like if you look at DJ James' hands, they look like I don't know if you ever see the SNL skit with Kirsten Wiig where she has like the little doll hands as one of the sisters. These are small hands, dude.
Wow.
But I'm excited about DJ James. That sounds great. So Seattle Overload, you can find that. Rob, how about you? What are you paying attention to coming up, and what's coming up for you on your show?
Well, I have a very busy work week with the day job this week, but then after that, I'll be returning to what I do every year, which is just try and watch every game of the quarterback class from the previous year. I have done Quinn Ewers, Jackson Dart, Shadir Sanders, Riley Leonard so far. I need to do Brady Cook, Carson Beck, Garrett Nussmeier hasn't played, and Max Brosmer. I need to see him actually play in the Big Ten before making a judgment. There's a few others as well, but there will be probably an article that is too long for most people coming out in probably a couple of weeks' time discussing these guys. But if you want sort of an early thought on, I think high numbers, but it's quite hard to find an early first round quarterback for 2025. I don't know if that's a good thing or not for the Seahawks, but I think there's intriguing players, but there's nobody you think, ooh, that's the top 5 pick there.
I've got to tell you well ahead of time. I was a don't get JJ McCarthy this year guy. I think we've all talked about that. That was not my guy. Quinn, not my guy.
That's interesting.
Maybe you'll turn me around on him.
Well, I mean, just give a quick thought on him. I think the thing with him is he has probably got as much natural talent as anybody could have sort of in college football. The problem for him is consistency. I mean, like on one play, the downfield throw against Alabama was probably the throw of the year in college football, along with Penix's insane running to his left and throwing it down the sideline at USC.
Yeah.
So, but then Ewers will equally underthrow that same pass. He will throw it 10 yards away from where it needs to be in another game. He's had a bunch of injuries which are starting to pick up. He's tall enough, but his weight fluctuates, and he was very small last year. He was like 190 pounds. He is good at scrambling, but there's a lot of talent there. I think there's going to be no middle ground with him. He is either about to have a Heisman level season, and he's going to be a top 10 pick, or he's going to fall under the weight of losing his top 3 receivers and a good tackle. He's going to get injured again. They're in the SEC now. They've got a road game against Michigan on their schedule as well. I don't know why they've done that. And he's got Arch Manning waiting in the wings, who just had a good spring. So, like I say, he's either going to end up flying through this and being a high pick, or he's going to end up transferring somewhere in a year. Like I don't think Quinn Ewers just has a reasonable year and goes in round 2 or 3 is realistic. I think it's going to be one thing or the other.
Yeah. I mean, he's like a 4th round guy for me at this point. Like, there's got to be something he's going to have to really.
I thought that Washington game he played. I've watched it a couple of times, and I thought he played a lot better than people thought. But we'll see.
We will see. I love hearing that there's already 2025 draft. That's why I got the Seahawks draft blog. That's why you got to check him out there. And as far as me, for folks that are tuning in, tomorrow morning, I'm actually going to, on Hawk Blogger Mornings, delve into a key part of what was a problem for the Seahawks last year and for a number of years, 3rd downs. I'm going to break down where they were. I'm going to talk about 3rd and short and some of the problems there. I'm also going to talk about, in the playoffs, a key stat that a lot of people might not be aware of that's been at least somewhat correlative to winning in the playoffs. And it's not just third down offense. I'll talk more about that tomorrow. So tune in for Hawk Blogger Mornings. I will also be talking to Brady Henderson. At some point, I'll be talking to Mike Sando. Don't have those on the books, but we'll have more of that. So keep an eye out. If you haven't already, click like and subscribe. What are you doing here? Come on, click like and click subscribe. If you haven't done that for Rob's channel and for Seattle Overload, please do that as well. And we had a new YouTube member join today. So want to welcome Steve England for joining as a YouTube member. The link is pinned in chat. You can join as a YouTube member as well. It's also in the description of the video. And patreon.com/hawkblogger. You join there. You get the audio version of these podcasts. I'm going to post that immediately after the show. So please go ahead and join there. You get access to the Slack channel where you can tease me about missing out on my Mariners parlays, because we talk Mariners. We talk other things as well. All right, everybody. Thank you to Rob Staton at Rob Staton on Twitter. Thank you to Griffin Sturgeon at C Mike's Spin Move, 2 S's on Twitter, for joining on Sunday, or as it may be for Rob, Monday morning. Cheers, guys. Thanks for joining.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your weekend.